You ever show up to a place that used to be the whole point of your Saturdays and find nothing but a pile of nails and a yellow ribbon? That's what hit me the day I drove down the long gravel road to Willow Hollow. And I swear, for a second I thought my heart had gone missing along with the porch swing. The cabin was gone well, not gone like they sold it. Gone like someone took a bulldozer and scraped my life off the map. And there was a sign with a logo I didn't care to know. The Hollow Ridge Association, all neat lettering and smug authority. My name's Eli Mercer. I bought that cabin 10 years ago because I wanted one small place where mornings smelled like coffee and pine, where I could fix a fence and not answer to anyone. It was nothing fancy to rooms, crooked windows, a dock that leaned a little to the right, but it was mine. And for the 2 years I shared it with June, it was everything. When she died, the place didn't stop being home. It just kept the echoes. I told myself it was a private grief, that the world could go on spinning and I'd have my little patch of lake to breathe. Then the notices started showing up. First, a polite letter about an alleged violation, then a stack of fines with dates and numbers I'd never seen before. I thought paperwork, clerks, one of those annoying administrative errors you shrug off. I walked down to the association office glass desk, fake plant, the sort of place that practices officiousness in front of mirrors, and the woman behind the counter, Vivian Lockwood, smiled like she'd been taught to smile for headlines. "We followed procedure," she said, with the kind of calm that wanted to be an apology. Only it wasn't one. There was no warning, no hearing, just a printed order that somehow placed my cabin outside the community boundary. "We're enforcing the new survey," she said. "County records updated." That's when the little knot in my chest stopped being a knot and turned into a searchlight. I started digging not because I was looking to make enemies, but because it felt dishonest to let my life be erased by someone who'd call it administrative. Old deeds, plat maps, the musty boxes in the county clerk's office that smell like old glue and patience. I spent weeks there with a flashlight and a pencil, learning how the world hides things in plain sight. And in a manila folder that had June's handwriting on the outside, I found a different signature: Lakeside Development, then a transfer record, then a note about a defaulted agreement. It wasn't just a survey mistake. There was a paper trail leading to a shell company, and then back to Vivian's circle people with smiles like stationery and a plan that smelled of profit. You could say I should have called a lawyer then. And sure, I called one. But lawyers are expensive and slow, and there's something stubborn that kicks in when the thing you love is being eaten away by people speaking in polite nouns. I reactivated the LLC June and I had used years ago when we did small renovations, not to hide anything, God, but to hold a piece of paper that might legally belong to me. I filed notices, I certified deliveries, I learned the rhythm of legal language until it comforted me like a metronome. I also started showing up more town meetings, association dinners, the kind of social calendar I used to avoid. People who used to wave when I drove by stopped, or they waved with thin lips, the kind of wave that copies whatever the mob is doing. There was a moment, about halfway through the fight, when I thought maybe this was all a misunderstanding, and Vivian invited me to talk. I went because a man can only throw so many stones before his hands are raw. The meeting room smelled like lemon cleaner and cheap coffee. Vivian sat with a stack of documents and that same smile, as if she thought smiling made anything lighter. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "this is about community standards." I told her I'd lived here longer than most and I'd paid my dues, and I didn't know how our home had become a line on a map someone could cross out. Her eyes flicked to the window, to the row of neighbors pretending not to listen. "Eli," she said, voice smooth, "sometimes things change. We have to move forward." What she meant, I learned, was moving forward without me. After that meeting, things got uglier. Late-night notes on my truck, tires slashed small, cowardly things meant to wear you down. A group of men from the association came out one night and cut down the fig tree that shaded the back porch, and they did it with those efficient, municipal hands as if it were city maintenance. I caught a glimpse of them through the window, mud on their boots, laughter like a cough. One of them nudged another, a line about teaching him a lesson. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't furious. I'd be lying if I said I didn't want to fight back with the kind of force that leaves scars. But the real fight was paperwork and witnesses and finding the right kind of shame to put into public view. So I went to the one place where stories matter, the community meeting. I'd been preparing maps, copies of deeds, a timeline that made sense in the light of day. I stood up in a room full of people who, until a month ago, had borrowed sugar from me, and I put the truth on the table. I showed them the original survey, the transfer, the defaulted agreement documents that told a cleaner story than any rumor. I told them about the bulldozer I'd seen at dawn, about the fig tree, about letters that arrived stamped with official seals that weren't official at all. They listened, some with their arms crossed, some with their phones half-aimed like it was a sport, and then a sound shifted an intake of breath that felt like a tide turning. Vivian tried the usual denial, half explanations, and appealed to bylaws, but when a few neighbors compared notes, when names matched names and receipts matched faces, the room changed. People who had signed things without reading them, who had trusted neat fonts and familiar faces, began to ask questions. A woman near the back Marta, who sold pies from a stand on weekends, stood up and said, "I've got the same letter on my door," and the panic on Vivian's face was cheap and obvious. It wasn't about a single man and his cabin anymore. It was about a system that let a few people play ruler for the rest of us. The association's power dimmed in the light of plain facts. That was the turning point. Not some cinematic brawl, although there was one of those. Briefly, the night a truck backed into my dock and left like a ghost, but the slow, steady peeling back of pretense. A couple of county officials came down when their phones lit up with pictures people had taken. An investigator I didn't know shook my hand and said, "You did the right thing showing up," and I felt ridiculous and relieved at the same time. The bulldozer driver was interviewed. The shell company's filings were flagged. Neighbors started talking about reclaiming that half-built community center as a shared workshop instead of a private clubhouse. Still, roofs aren't rebuilt without hands, and apologies don't grow trees back. There was a small, cinematic justice that came when Vivian and two associates were found to have orchestrated permits through dishonest means criminal charges, the kind of paperwork that is finally loud enough to be a consequence. They denied everything with the same smoothness they once denied my right to exist on a map, but the evidence creaked against them like an old floorboard telling on itself. The sheriff's deputy who finally walked me through the wreckage said, quietly, "You made everyone look." I guess I had. I'd become, without planning it, the messenger who wouldn't go away. In the weeks after, the neighborhood turned into something I recognized again, not perfect, but honest. We rebuilt the dock with neighbors showing up carrying tools and casseroles, because that's the real currency of a place. People who remember why it matters. We put up a simple plaque at the edge of the Lakino Big Ceremonies, just a small wooden sign that says Willow Hollow Collective, because the cabin was never only mine. It was a place where June's laugh lives on in the pots on the windowsill, where kids who aren't mine learn to skip stones, where people come to breathe. I kept a photograph of June taped inside the rebuilt kitchen cabinet, the way she liked to hide little notes, and sometimes I talk to that photograph when the night is quiet. I'm not telling you this for pity, if anything. I want to hand you the part of the story that matters. Power is easy to put on when people stop asking questions. Small decisions become precedent. Neat fonts become law if no one reads the ink. If you find yourself in a place you love, check the papers, talk to your neighbors, hold meetings even when they're awkward, because the alternative is someone else deciding what your memory is worth. And if you've ever had a place taken from you or watched a neighbor swept aside by a rumor dressed as policy, tell me I want to hear it. So tell me in the comments, what would you have done at the town hall? Was I brave or stubborn, or both? Who's to blame, the system that lets a few rewrite rules, or the people who let it happen? Share your thoughts, share your stories, and if you like this, hit share so someone else might remember to read their deeds once in a while. We rebuild best when we do it together.